The fortress of what if, overthinking, chronic anxiety, and living in imaginary scenarios. Julian didn't live in a house. He lived inside a fortress he built brick by brick out of every what if scenario his mind could invent. It started small, a worry about a job interview, a fear of saying the wrong thing at dinner, but over time, those fleeting anxieties hardened into heavy stone. Every mistake he might make became a wall. Every risk he might run into became an iron bar across his window. He believed that if he could anticipate every single disaster before it happened, he would be completely safe. But safety, he was beginning to realize, felt remarkably like a prison. The thick walls did the job. They kept him safe from failure, safe from rejection, and safe from making a fool of himself. But they also kept him completely safe from living. From the high narrow window of his tower, Julian spent his days watching the world outside move in full, brilliant color. He saw people starting businesses that sometimes failed, but led to new adventures. He saw artists painting canvases, musicians playing out of tune and laughing, and strangers falling in love despite the risk of broken hearts. They were getting bruised, yes, but they were alive. Julian, wrapped in his untouchable security, felt like a ghost spectating a world he wasn't allowed to touch. One quiet evening, as the rain tapped against the cold stone, Julian looked at his hands and realized he was exhausting himself running fire drills for fires that had never actually started. He had rehearsed 1,000 heartbreaks that never happened, mourned 100 failures that were purely imaginary, and fought endless battles against shadows. His mind was constantly in survival mode, but there was nothing to survive except his own imagination. A quiet rage sparked in his chest, a sudden, overwhelming tiredness of being a helpless prisoner to problems that only existed in his head. He walked up to the heavy oak door, the one he hadn't touched in years, and placed his trembling palm against the wood. His heart hammered in his chest as his brain screamed 100 final warnings. What if you step outside and fall? What if it's too much? Julian took a long, grounding breath, locked eyes with the doorframe, and said out loud, "Then I'll fall." He grabbed the iron latch and threw the heavy door open. A blinding wave of golden daylight flooded the room, cutting through the shadows. And as the sunlight touched the heavy stone walls of his fortress, the solid rock began to crack, crumbling away into soft, floating dandelion seeds that drifted away on the breeze. The monsters he had feared for years were nothing more than dust and mirrors. Julian stood in the middle of an open green field, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face and the cool grass beneath his feet for the first time in memory. There was no guarantee that tomorrow would be easy. There was no promise that he wouldn't make mistakes or experience pain. But for the first time in his life, he didn't care, because he was finally here, existing in the actual world, rather than surviving an imaginary one inside his head. Stop rehearsing tragedies that haven't happened yet. You cannot enjoy the brightness of today if you are constantly building shelters for storms that may never come. Open the door and step into the light. If this reminder helped you step out of the shadows of tomorrow and embrace the peace of today, please like, share, and subscribe.